Dr. Hana Kim floated in her zero-gravity laboratory, surrounded by thousands of glowing data screens that painted her pale blue skin with shifting rainbows of light. For over 3,000 years, she had been the galaxy's most trusted xenobiologist, carefully documenting every single species that had ever managed to build a spaceship and leave their homeworld. Her job was simple but crucial. When the Zephyrian Science Collective detected new civilizations, Hana would study their technology signatures and determine how advanced they were, what they might trade, and most importantly, whether they posed any threat to the established galactic order. The morning started like any other. Hana sipped her usual breakfast of liquid nutrients while reviewing overnight sensor reports from the Outer Rim territories. Most readings were routine. The crystalline builders were still constructing their massive space cities using thought-controlled matter manipulation. The gas dwellers continued harvesting plasma storms with their living ships, and the machine collective kept expanding their network of interconnected robot worlds. Everything was predictable, cataloged, and perfectly normal. Then her main computer started screaming. Not literally screaming, of course, but the urgent alarm that pierced through her laboratory meant something extraordinary had been detected. Hana's tentacles immediately began dancing across her control interfaces as she pulled up the source of the disturbance. The readings were coming from a small yellow star in a quiet sector that most civilizations ignored, a tiny solar system with a few rocky planets and nothing particularly interesting. Expect the third planet was doing impossible things. According to her sensors, this little blue and green world was somehow generating faster than light communication signals without using quantum entanglement networks. Every species in the galaxy knew that instant communication across vast distances required massive quantum computers that cost entire planetary budgets to build and maintain. Yet these readings suggested that whatever lived on this planet had found another way, a way that used far less energy and seemed almost ridiculously simple. But that was just the beginning of the strangeness. Her deep space scanners were also detecting energy signatures that made no sense according to established physics. The inhabitants appeared to be creating materials that could repair themselves when damaged, but they weren't using the standard molecular reconstruction techniques that required enormous amounts of power. Instead, they seemed to be accomplishing the same results with what looked like basic chemical reactions that any first-year science student could perform. Hana checked and double-checked her equipment. She ran diagnostic programs on every sensor array, recalibrated her quantum measuring devices, and even had her computer systems examined by the collective's best technicians. Everything was working perfectly. The impossible readings were real. What made it even more puzzling was that these humans, for that's what the linguistic analysis programs had determined they called themselves, appeared to be using these reality-breaking technologies for the most mundane purposes. Instead of conquering other worlds or building massive space empires like every other advanced species, they seemed to be using their miraculous inventions to fix broken household items, preserve food, and solve everyday problems. The more Hana studied the data, the more confused she became. These humans had somehow achieved technological breakthroughs that the galaxy's greatest scientists had been trying to accomplish for millions of years, but they appeared to treat these miracles as completely ordinary. Her translation programs picked up casual conversations where humans discussed these incredible inventions the same way other species might talk about the weather. After spending 3 sleepless days analyzing the data, Hana made a decision that would change everything. She authorized the dispatch of 3 of the collective's most advanced survey ships, each equipped with the finest scientific instruments available and crewed by specialists who had studied hundreds of alien civilizations. Their mission was to make direct contact with these humans and determine how they had managed to break the fundamental laws of physics that governed the rest of the galaxy. As the ships prepared for their journey to Earth, Hana found herself both excited and terrified. In her long career, she had never encountered anything that challenged her understanding of how the universe worked. These humans were either the most dangerous species ever discovered, or they were about to teach the galaxy that everything they thought they knew about science and technology was completely wrong. She had no idea that she was about to witness something far more profound than advanced technology. She was about to discover the power of human ingenuity and the simple solutions that worked better than any complex invention the galaxy had ever produced. Commander Jinwoo Park had been preparing for this moment his entire military career. As the lead officer of the Hegemony Defense Corps' First Contact Division, he had developed strict protocols based on 17 previous encounters with alien civilizations. The pattern was always the same. Newly discovered species either trembled in fear when they saw his massive warships, or they immediately began showing off their most powerful weapons in aggressive displays of strength. Both responses were perfectly normal and expected. His 3 ships descended through Earth's atmosphere in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced shielding technology that could deflect plasma cannons and antimatter missiles. Jinwoo had positioned his fleet in what military strategists called an intimidating but non-threatening arrangement, close enough to demonstrate their superior technology, but far enough away to avoid seeming like an invasion force. His communication systems were ready to broadcast the standard first contact message in 17 different languages, explaining that they came in peace but possessed overwhelming firepower if provoked. What happened next would be talked about in military academies across the galaxy for centuries. Instead of panicking or mobilizing their armies, the humans did something that had never happened before in recorded galactic history. They sent a simple radio transmission that roughly translated to, "Hey there, space folks, y'all hungry? We're firing up the grill and cracking open some cold ones. Come on down and grab a bite." Jinwoo stared at his translation screen in complete bewilderment. His linguistic specialists ran the message through their computers 3 times, convinced there must be some error. Surely no civilization would invite unknown alien visitors to share food immediately after first contact. It had to be some kind of code, perhaps a clever way of saying, "We surrender," or "Please don't destroy us." But when Jinwoo's ships landed in a large field outside a small human town, he discovered that the invitation was completely genuine. The welcoming committee consisted of about 30 humans who had set up folding tables, cooking devices that filled the air with delicious smells, and containers filled with cold beverages. There were no soldiers, no weapons, and no signs of fear whatsoever. The humans introduced themselves with names like Kyung-soo, Minji, and Tai-hyung, ordinary people who worked as farmers, mechanics, shop owners, and teachers. They treated the arrival of 3 massive alien warships like neighbors welcoming a new family to the neighborhood. They asked questions about where Jinwoo and his crew came from, offered them chairs to sit in, and immediately began loading plates with something they called barbecue and potato salad. What struck Jinwoo most was how genuinely curious and friendly they were. Instead of being intimidated by his advanced armor and weapons, they wanted to know if the technology was comfortable to wear, and whether his species ate the same kinds of food. When one of his crew members mentioned that their long journey through space had been difficult, a human mechanic named Hyunwoo immediately offered to take a look at their ships to see if anything needed fixing. This was where things got truly bizarre. During the meal, one of Jinwoo's junior officers quietly reported that they had discovered a small hull breach in Ship 2, caused by micrometeorite damage during their journey to Earth. The breach was minor but concerning, as their molecular bonding agents, the most advanced repair technology in the galaxy, hadn't been able to create a perfect seal. The damaged area was slowly losing atmospheric pressure, which could become dangerous during their return journey. When Hyunwoo heard about the problem, he walked over to his pickup truck and returned with a roll of what he called duct tape. This silver-colored adhesive strip looked ridiculously primitive compared to their sophisticated repair equipment, but Hyunwoo assured them it would fix the problem. Jinwoo watched in amazement as the human simply cleaned the breach area and applied the tape in a crisscross pattern. The results were impossible to believe. Not only did the duct tape create a perfect seal, but their instruments showed it was actually stronger than the original hull material. The molecular bonding agents that cost thousands of credits per application and required specialized equipment to use had been completely outperformed by a roll of tape that cost less than what Jinwoo spent on lunch. As the evening continued, more examples of human ingenuity emerged. When his communication officer complained that their quantum radio was producing static, a human named Soo-young fixed it by hitting it gently with a rubber mallet, a technique she called percussive maintenance. When their environmental systems started making strange noises, a farmer named Dong-hyun solved the problem with something called WD-40, a spray that apparently fixed everything. By the time Jinwoo and his crew prepared to leave Earth, he realized they had encountered something far more dangerous than any military force they had ever faced. These humans weren't primitive. They were terrifyingly practical. They had somehow developed simple solutions that worked better than the galaxy's most advanced technology. Professor Minji Lee had dedicated her entire existence to understanding one of the universe's greatest mysteries: why some civilizations achieved incredible technological advancement, while others remained stuck with primitive tools. For over 2,000 years, she had traveled across 17 galaxies, studying hundreds of different species and documenting their journey from simple stone tools to complex spacefaring technology. Her research had led to what became known as the Enlightenment correlation theory, which was taught in universities across the known universe. The theory was elegantly simple. The more spiritually and intellectually evolved a species became, the more sophisticated their technology grew. Primitive species used crude hammers and basic fire. Advanced civilizations developed quantum computers and reality manipulation devices. It was a beautiful, logical progression that explained everything. At least it did until she met the humans. Minji arrived on Earth as part of the second wave of scientific observers, her crystalline body shimmering with excitement at the opportunity to study a newly discovered species. Based on initial reports, humans appeared to be somewhere in the middle of the technological development scale. They had basic space travel and simple computers, but nothing that seemed particularly advanced compared to other civilizations at their level. She set up her research station in what humans called a community college in a small town, where she could observe their daily interactions with technology without causing too much disruption. Her plan was simple: spend a few months documenting human tool use, categorize their inventions according to complexity levels, and add another data point to her already impressive research. Everything went wrong on the very first day. Minji was examining the college's computer laboratory, taking notes on their primitive quantum processors, when the machines began overheating and shutting down. The human instructor, a middle-aged man named Professor Jin-hyuk, seemed completely unconcerned by what should have been a serious technical crisis. Instead of calling repair specialists or consulting complex technical manuals, he simply walked to a supply closet and returned with an aerosol can labeled WD-40. Minji watched in fascination as Professor Jin-hyuk sprayed this mysterious substance onto the quantum processor's heat dissipation units. Within minutes, the computers were running better than they had in months. When Minji ran her analysis equipment on the machines, she nearly fainted from shock. The crude human spray had somehow increased the processor's efficiency by 340%. This was impossible according to everything she knew about technology and physics. WD-40 appeared to be nothing more than a simple petroleum-based lubricant, the kind of primitive chemical mixture that early civilizations might use to prevent metal from rusting. Yet somehow, it was enhancing quantum computing systems that required precise molecular alignment and perfect environmental conditions to function properly. Minji spent the next several days running test after test, convinced that her equipment must be malfunctioning. But the results were always the same. This simple human invention was somehow improving advanced technology in ways that the galaxy's best scientists couldn't explain. Just when she thought things couldn't get any stranger, she met Do-yun. Do-yun was 17 years old, a human teenager who worked part-time at the college helping to maintain their equipment. He had no formal training in advanced physics, no university degrees, and no knowledge of quantum mechanics or reality manipulation theory. According to Minji's research scale, he should barely understand how basic tools worked, much less be able to repair sophisticated technology. The crisis began when the college's reality phasing generator, a device they used for advanced research experiments, suddenly stopped working. This machine was one of the most complex pieces of equipment known to galactic science, capable of shifting matter between different dimensional phases. Repairing it should have required a team of specialists with decades of training and access to the most advanced diagnostic tools in the universe. Instead, Professor Jinhyuk, called Doyun Minji, watched in growing amazement as the teenager examined the massive, incomprehensibly complex machine for about 10 minutes, occasionally poking at components with his finger and listening to the sounds it made. Then he walked to his toolbox and returned with what he called wire nuts and a roll of electrical tape. The wire nuts were simple plastic connectors designed to join electrical wires together. The electrical tape was basic adhesive material used to insulate connections. Together, they cost less than what Minji spent on her morning nutrition supplements. Yet within 30 minutes, Do-hyun had completely restored the reality phasing generator to perfect working condition, using nothing but these ridiculously simple tools. When Minji asked him how he knew what to do, Do-hyun just shrugged and said, "It was making a weird noise, so I figured some connections had come loose. Wire nuts hold things together pretty good, and tape keeps moisture out. Seemed like it would work." It was at that moment that Minji's entire worldview collapsed. For thousands of years, she had believed that technological advancement required increasing complexity. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy used machines so sophisticated that they required artificial intelligence just to operate them. Their repair techniques involved molecular reconstruction, quantum field manipulation, and reality-bending mathematics that took centuries to master. But humans had discovered something that the rest of the galaxy had completely missed. True technological mastery wasn't about creating the most complex solution possible. It was about finding the simplest solution that actually worked. These humans hadn't failed to develop advanced technology because they were primitive. They had evolved beyond the need for unnecessarily complicated solutions because they understood something that supposedly superior civilizations had forgotten. Sometimes the best answer was also the most obvious one. The emergency session of the Galactic Science Council had never been called with such urgency in over 50,000 years. Representatives from across the known universe gathered in the massive crystal chamber that floated in the void between galaxies, their various forms of transportation creating a spectacular light show as ships materialized from hyperspace, dimensional, portals, and thought projection networks. Council leader Vorthak, an ancient being whose species had achieved technological perfection millions of years ago, floated at the center of the assembly with growing concern. The reports flooding in from every corner of the galaxy were so bizarre that many council members initially dismissed them as elaborate hoaxes or mass hallucinations. The crisis had begun 3 months earlier when human inventions started spreading through galactic trade networks. What had initially seemed like harmless curiosities from a primitive species had somehow triggered the most dramatic technological revolution in recorded history. Civilizations that had remained unchanged for millions of years were suddenly experiencing breakthroughs that their greatest scientists had deemed impossible. The first report came from the crystalline hive mind, a collective consciousness that had struggled with fragmented thoughts for eons. Their shared mental network had been damaged during an ancient war, leaving gaps in their collective intelligence that no amount of advanced technology could repair. Thousands of their best mind healers had attempted to reconnect the fractured consciousness cores using quantum neural networks and probability field generators, but nothing had worked. Then a human trader named Kyung-soo arrived at their homeworld carrying a small tube of what he called superglue. When the crystalline beings explained their problem, Kyung-soo suggested they try applying tiny drops of the adhesive to the connection points between their consciousness cores. The hive mind's scientists were initially insulted by the suggestion. How could a primitive chemical bonding agent accomplish what their most sophisticated mental reconstruction technology had failed to achieve? But they were desperate enough to try anything. The results were miraculous. The superglue didn't just repair the damaged connections. It created bonds that were stronger and more flexible than the original neural pathways. For the first time in millions of years, the crystalline hive mind achieved perfect unity of thought. Their collective intelligence increased by orders of magnitude overnight, and they immediately began sharing this discovery with other civilizations. The second breakthrough came from the gas giant dwellers, massive entities that lived in the upper atmospheres of enormous planets and had been trying to perfect plasma-based technology for countless millennia. Their plasma containment systems required incredibly complex magnetic field generators that consumed enormous amounts of energy and frequently failed at critical moments. A human child named Youngji, visiting the gas giants with her parents on a diplomatic mission, was fascinated by their plasma experiments. When she saw them struggling to maintain stable plasma formations, she offered them some of her silly putty, a simple stretchy material that humans gave to children as a toy. The gas giant dwellers were initially confused by the pink, bouncy substance, but when they incorporated it into their plasma containment systems, the results defied every law of physics they understood. The silly putty somehow provided the perfect medium for plasma manipulation, allowing them to create stable, controllable plasma formations with 90% less energy consumption. Even more shocking was the discovery by the Ascended Ones, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form eons ago and spent their existence in deep meditation across multiple dimensions. These entities had been searching for the perfect meditation environment for millions of years, experimenting with complex reality-bending chambers and consciousness-expanding field generators. The breakthrough came when Ambassador Sunho Choi, Earth's representative to the Galactic Council, was unpacking supplies for the human embassy. The Ascended Ones were curious about the strange sheets of plastic filled with air bubbles that humans called bubble wrap. When Sunho explained that humans used it to protect fragile items during shipping, the energy beings decided to experiment with it as a meditation aid. The results were beyond anything they had experienced. The bubble wrap created perfect isolation chambers for energy-based consciousness, allowing them to achieve levels of meditation and dimensional awareness that had been impossible with their most advanced technology. The simple act of existing within the bubble-filled plastic somehow harmonized their energy patterns and enhanced their spiritual capabilities. But the most stunning revelation came from Ambassador Sunho himself during his address to the Council. The Trade Federation had been struggling with faster-than-light shielding problems for over 1,000 years. Their ships needed protection from dimensional radiation during hyperspace travel. But every solution they had developed was either too expensive, too complex, or too unreliable for practical use. Sunho opened a package of ordinary aluminum foil and demonstrated how human spacecraft used thin sheets of this simple metal to create perfect radiation shielding. The material cost almost nothing to produce, required no maintenance, and provided better protection than the Trade Federation's most expensive quantum barriers. As report after report poured in from across the galaxy, the assembled representatives began to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented. The most advanced civilizations in the universe, species that had achieved technological mastery beyond imagination, were being outperformed by simple human inventions that any child could understand and use. Council Leader Vorthak finally spoke the words that everyone was thinking, but nobody wanted to admit. The galaxy's greatest minds had been overthinking everything for millions of years, creating unnecessarily complex solutions to problems that could be solved with basic materials and common sense. The humans hadn't failed to develop advanced technology. They had evolved beyond the need for it by discovering that the best solutions were often the simplest ones. 6 months after first contact, the galaxy looked completely different than anyone could have imagined. What had started as a simple, scientific survey of an unremarkable planet had turned into the most dramatic shift in galactic politics and technology in recorded history. Earth, a tiny blue world that most civilizations had never heard of, had become the most important diplomatic destination in the known universe. The transformation began with the Draconian Empire, the galaxy's most feared military force whose massive warships had dominated space for over 10 million years. Their antimatter propulsion systems were legendary, engines so powerful they could accelerate ships to near light speed, and so expensive that building a single fleet bankrupted entire star systems. The Draconians had built their empire on the superiority of their technology, using their advanced engines to outmaneuver and overwhelm any opposition. Everything changed when Emperor Zorthak visited Earth and met a human high school student named Jisoo during a chemistry demonstration. Jisoo was showing her class how mixing baking soda and vinegar created a chemical reaction that produced carbon dioxide gas and enough force to launch a small rocket across the classroom. The Emperor, whose species had spent millennia perfecting matter-antimatter annihilation for propulsion, watched in fascination as this simple combination of household ingredients produced thrust comparable to his empire's most basic engines. Within weeks, draconian scientists had scaled up the baking soda and vinegar reaction for use in their spacecraft. The results were revolutionary: ships that were faster, more maneuverable, and infinitely cheaper to operate than anything they had ever built. The Empire's military advantage hadn't disappeared, but now they could achieve the same results for a fraction of the cost, allowing them to redirect their massive military budget toward exploration and peaceful expansion. The ripple effects spread across the galaxy as other civilizations discovered that human solutions worked better than technologies they had been developing for millions of years. The Quantum Collective replaced their reality manipulation drives with rubber band-powered mechanisms after discovering that the elastic properties of simple latex provided better dimensional stability than their complex quantum field generators. The HiveMind networks found that paperclips created more efficient data connections than their biological neural networks. As these discoveries spread, Earth found itself at the center of the most unlikely diplomatic revolution in galactic history. Every major civilization wanted to establish embassies on the planet, not to conquer or control humans, but to learn from them. Trade ships arrived daily carrying the galaxy's most advanced technologies, hoping to exchange them for rolls of duct tape, bottles of WD-40, and packages of rubber bands. The human government, completely unprepared for their sudden importance in galactic affairs, made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of appointing career diplomats or military leaders to handle alien relations, they chose Ambassador Yuna Song, a recently retired high school chemistry teacher from a small town who had spent 30 years helping teenagers understand basic science. Yuna's first day as Galactic Ambassador began with what should have been an impossible situation. The energy beings from the ethereal dimension were engaged in a heated dispute with the silicon-based Crystalline Federation over mining rights to a neutron star. The argument had been going on for centuries, with both sides using increasingly complex legal frameworks and technological demonstrations to prove their superiority. Ambassador Yuna listened to both sides present their cases in the newly constructed Earth Diplomatic Center, a simple building that looked remarkably ordinary compared to the magnificent structures that housed other galactic institutions. As the energy beings projected complex mathematical proofs and the Crystalline Federation displayed molecular-level mining simulations, Yuna quietly prepared a pot of Earl Grey tea. When both sides finished their presentations, she invited them to sit around a simple wooden table and offered them tea. The energy beings had never experienced the calming effects of warm beverages, while the Crystalline Federation found that the tea's chemical properties enhanced their silicon-based thought processes. As they relaxed and began talking more casually, Yuna helped them realize that they had been arguing about a problem that didn't actually exist. The neutron star they were fighting over contained enough resources for both civilizations to use for millions of years. Instead of competing, they could simply work together and share the benefits. The solution was so obvious that both sides were embarrassed they hadn't thought of it themselves. Within an hour, they had signed a cooperation agreement that ended their centuries-long dispute. Word of Ambassador Yuna's success spread quickly through diplomatic channels. Soon, her simple conference room was hosting peace negotiations between civilizations that had been at war for millennia. Her approach was always the same: provide a comfortable environment, offer food and drinks, and help the participants focus on practical solutions instead of complex theories. The breakthrough moment came during a particularly difficult negotiation between 12 different species, arguing over territorial boundaries. The discussion had become so heated that several representatives were threatening to leave when Ambassador Yuna quietly placed a bowl of rubber bands in the center of the table. As the alien diplomats continued arguing, they absent-mindedly began playing with the rubber bands, stretching them, connecting them, and creating simple shapes. The tactile activity somehow helped them think more clearly and communicate more effectively. By the end of the day, they had resolved disputes that had seemed completely unsolvable just hours earlier. Watching these sophisticated beings find solutions while playing with simple rubber bands, Ambassador Yuna finally understood what made humans special in the galaxy. It wasn't that they had invented better tools, it was that they had never forgotten that the best tools were the ones that actually worked, regardless of how simple or complex they appeared to be. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization wasn't duct tape or WD-40 or baking soda. It was the revolutionary idea that sometimes the most advanced solution was also the most obvious one, and that the best technology was whatever got the job done effectively and efficiently. As she watched energy beings and crystalline entities work together to solve problems using nothing but common sense and basic materials, Una realized that humans had given the galaxy something far more valuable than advanced technology. They had given them permission to stop overthinking everything and start focusing on what actually worked.